now joining in conversation to discuss climate change solutions. Here's the director of the Climate Science Center, Texas Tech University, and the founder and CEO of Atmos Research, Katharine Hayhoe, and the executive director of Project Drawdown, Jon Foley. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
And what an honor to be in the same virtual room as both of you. I mean, you two are the most recognized houses in climate science today, and you are so deeply committed not only to climate solutions, but also to making sure that these solutions are communicated effectively and implemented with purpose, which is so important. So we've spent the last couple of days hearing from world experts on the urgency behind biodiversity loss, climate change. And if everyone watching feels anything like I do right now, we want to know what we can do as individuals in our daily lives to help. How can we reduce our personal carbon footprint? Katharine, let's start with you and then see what Jon has to say.
Absolutely. Well, so often when we think about climate change and doing something about it, we immediately jump to what could I do personally? But when we crunch the numbers, we understand that this is not just an issue of individuals, it is a system-wide problem. It's estimated that 90 companies have produced 2/3 of heat-trapping gas emissions since the dawn of the industrial era. Even if all of us who are concerned and alarmed about climate change reduced our carbon footprint as low as we possibly could, that would only address a fraction of the problem. And that is why I am absolutely convinced that the single most important thing that any of us can do about climate change is use our voices to talk about it and to advocate for system-wide change at every level, from reducing our own and our family's carbon footprint, as both Jon and I have done, up to talking with our businesses, our organizations, our schools, our cities, communities, states, countries, and beyond.
What about you, Jon? Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I totally agree with Catherine, of course, because this is a systems problem, and we individuals are part of that system. So it is incumbent upon us, I think, to model that kind of behavior when we can of lowering our emissions, not just because they lower the emissions, that matters, but also because it sends a signal to others, politically, financially, socially, and otherwise. It's kind of like voting every day with your wallet and with your friends and on Facebook, if you will. So I think that is still important, but we have to recognize this is a much bigger systems problem where we also have to see big changes in policy, huge movement of capital away from very bad things for the planet towards good things for the planet, but also changing the rules and incentives for business and investing. And also we need new technologies and new ways of handling our infrastructure. So it's really a kind of all above approach. And maybe, and Catherine says this better than anyone, the best thing we can do is always be learning, always be sharing, and I would add, always be collaborating towards a system-wide solution to climate change. Nothing alone can do it, but if we work together across scales, across the system, we certainly can.
That seems to be a really big theme across the entire summit is collaboration and working together and combining expertise. And well, I know with you, Jon, I've been looking into Project Drawdown, which is an amazing organization, and I've seen that you put a lot of emphasis on carbon sinks. Can you tell our audience a little bit more about what a carbon sink is and maybe what the difference is between natural sinks found in land and water and compared to engineered sinks?
Sure. To solve climate change, though, it's really important to address kind of three legs of the stool. We must start with the sources of greenhouse gas pollution, the things we put into the sky. You begin right there. You cannot solve the problem without doing that. So start with the sources. But then we also have sinks, where nature removes about 40% of our greenhouse gases each year for free, automatically. mostly in forest and in the oceans. So that means we can reduce our pollution, but also work with nature. And that combination of reducing the pollution and enhancing nature's sinks can maybe help us get to the solution. Imagine a bathtub where this overflowing into your bathroom. The first thing you do is you turn off the faucet, then you unplug the drain. And that's just like the atmosphere. We're filling it up with pollution, but we can also remove it with sinks. Now, today, nature is the only game in town as a carbon sink. But some very clever engineers and other folks are building some machines that so far are mainly prototypes. I don't think we should be betting the future on them. I'd rather just cut the pollution from the get go and work with nature, but these could be helpful down the road too. But at Drawdown, we actually only review technologies that are actually in the world right now. And we find that by reducing the pollution, helping nature, and also transforming other parts of our society, we can maybe get the job done, but we're going to need a lot of help.
So, and I'll shift this question over to you, Catherine. In line with that, what do you think the role of, say, soil and agriculture has in creating climate solutions? We talk about natural environments in our forests and our oceans, but what about that land that we're actually working on every day?
Farmers have the opportunity to really be climate heroes. And this is an important message because often farmers are a group of people who tend to say, oh, well, climate always changes. How do we know this is real? But we know that 99.9% of the objections to the science have nothing to actually do with science, everything to do with perceived solutions. They don't think there are solutions that are consistent and compatible with their values. But it turns out that stewardship of the soil is one of the most important ways to draw carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil where we want it, where it's good for us, rather than the atmosphere where it isn't. So engaging farmers is really important. And I'm delighted that the Anthropocene exhibit in the brand new Fossil Hall in the Smithsonian Natural History Museum has a bunch of little short movies, and one of them is specifically about a farmer here in West Texas who is managing his land and doing so in order to both enrich the soil and store carbon.
Great. So I think we've got quite a few young people watching. And as you've seen over the last few days, we've actually interviewed quite a few people that are climate activists and doing everything they can to help make an impact. So I'm wondering how this movement from the next generation of youth has impacted your work. So, in your opinion, do you think people are paying more attention as a result?
Mhm.
Um, I don't know who's going first, but I'll jump in. But I would
Uh,
love to hear what
I,
Catherine has to
Go
say.
ahead, John.
Absolutely, I think we need in other kind of big social transformations. It is so important to have a kind of a morally unassailable voice, reminding us what right and wrong are. And I think in the climate movement, we've had too many people who look too much like me, like middle-aged white dudes and scientists. That's okay. But when you have youth looking you in the eye and saying, hey, your generation is failing us, you're leaving us a depleted and degraded world. And as adults, you should know better. And you inherited a world from people who made it better for you. Now, can't you do the same for us? And when I hear from Greta and other youth activists, I listen and I hear a very sensible message of stewardship, of intergenerational obligations to one another. That's a kind of a moral grounding, but also that she simply asks us to listen to the science and to do what's right. I think that's a very powerful and very, very meaningful message. And I think it's the most resonant voice I've heard in the climate movement ever since it's begun. So I'm very excited about it.
Thank you, John.
Kids are
Well,
showing us that no
unfortunately,
one
we
is too
have
small
run out
to
of
make a
time.
difference, and that the
This
most kids
was
are the most powerful thing we can do is use our
you
voice.
finish.
Sorry. Okay, we're working with a bit of a delay here,
Sorry, there
people,
was a
so
bit
that's
of a
why there's
delay
these
there.
weird
So I
pauses.
cut you off.
I was just going to say that what the kids have shown us, yes, what the kids have shown us is that no one is too small to make a difference. And using our voice is the most powerful thing we can do. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Catherine. And this was such an honor having both of you on here. This was incredibly insightful, and truly, I applaud you for your leadership in climate change solutions. And I really look forward to hearing more about your work in the future. So thanks so much for coming.